Okay, we have now here a Howard the Duck Omnibus, and this is not a recommendation, it's basically an overview, because to show like what I found interesting about the series, the original series, and the book itself. Well, first, Howard the Duck appeared on this Man-Thing adventure written by Steve Gerber, who is the creator of Howard the Duck, and he is the writer on the original volume of Howard the Duck. And that's what I wanted to say, really. Now, what I found interesting about this omnibus, well, not omnibus, this series. Well, first we have to know that years, like the Howard the Duck series started on the 76, but he was created on 73 and 4. This first story, it doesn't have to do with him, it has to do with Man-Thing, it has to do like with meta comics, like there's a world where there are soldiers, there's a world where there's sorcery, so it's basically like a multiverse, like this is like a crossover between soldier comics, fantasy comics, superhero comics. They all like cross over on these issues. I didn't really like them. I mean, the idea I like them, but the issues itself, I didn't enjoy them that much. But it is the first appearance. It has the first appearance of this duck, because this duck comes from the world of anthropomorphic characters, animals. That's it, basically. In the end of the story, he falls on a portal that it's supposed to bring him back to his world. And now we have this series, Giant Sign Man-Thing, that has backups, 8 pages backups stories that have Howard as the protagonist. And it continues with Howard falling on this void. And in the end, he falls on planet Earth, our Earth, well, the Marvel Universe Earth. And on this, there are no anthropomorphic animals. So people think he's like a degenerate person and dressed as a duck. And this is, from this point on, I really like the series, because all the action, it is told through action, through the drawings and through dialogue. There are no narration box. That I really like it, because it feels modern, like modern comics. Like you look at this, the drawings, and these are not modern comics, but the way the pages are drawn, like sometimes there are no lines, limits to the frames. Sometimes these pages are distorted. It has a lot of experimentation, formal experimentation, that at least, thinking about this being published by Marvel in the 70s, it is pretty experimental. And that's what I really like about this series, like all these deformed frames. Well, the stories itself are really satirical. Themselves are really satirical, like they talk about society at the time, and sometimes, some things never change, so it keeps being like fresh or funny. You can understand it. And this issue has like a cow who is a vampire. Like this triangle frame. Really pretty weird choices. At least I found them to be weird. And that's basically it. The series starts. He has this like relationship with this cow uh, throughout the series, Beverly, and there's like a lot of sexual tension between them so it makes me feel like ask myself like who is the target of this comic at that time, because it is published by Marvel. It has some superheroes on some issues, and it has a lot of themes that I suppose were not supposed to be there at the time. For me, this is pretty much underground comics published by a mainstream company. You can see it has coloring. The coloring is the coloring used at the time. It is pretty mainstream if you look at it. But the artist, look at that backgrounds. He is more from a realistic kind of drawing style. Again, it is pretty different from the mainstream superhero comics at that time, in the 70s. So that's something that surprised me. Like, why would you put this top artist on this book that it was obviously not supposed to be like a bestseller? Well, there are interviews at the end. They talk about that. The artist talk about if he enjoyed this, knowing the series, that kind of stuff. I really like this also, like integrating the titles on the drawings, like the forming them in the way of on the sea, like pretty much based on what Will Eisner started, like integrating the titles on the drawings. But again, this is the 70s and it is Marvel. So pretty weird. Some frames without some frames without like drawings, and also yeah, that's pretty much it. The series at the first, it's laughing at this genre that is like in the Conan the Barbarian, sword and sorcery, but then it starts to laugh at the superhero comics and and society, and this is how we're dreaming. They are space saviors, but in the end he's living with this hot girl, and there's a lot of sexual tension between him and this duck, who is not a person, not a midget, and dressed as a duck, and with this girl. Funny, at least for me. But the issue has to with this turnip and the love and reading thoughts of people. That's like the theme of this issue. This issue talks about, like violence, how this affects kids, and violence on movies, but Howard gets pissed off at this, but when he gets angry, he gets immediately starts to fight. So it is like a contradiction, like he doesn't like violence on these movies, karate movies, but he's also a violent person. It is a commentary on that. Nothing too dense, but it is. Another one where this guy can't, while he's sleeping, he does things, and he's a creator and talks about creation. It is pretty meta, this series, talking about, the creation of stories and comics and all that. Again, the drawings are fucking awesome. Like, why this series had this kind of artists, like, like star talent, at least to me. Again, with the formalism on the pages. Well, this doesn't follow like one narrative, It is kind of like what will happen to this tag on the next episode. At some point, there's like an arc. Let's call it arc because he goes for congressman, president. This is an annual where there are the villains are like just really stupid villains, because this stupid series deserves stupid villains. And here we have like Howard goes for president, so there's it is just like one issue, I think, or two, but let's call it like an arc because I think it's one of the most memorables. When he gives a speech, the pages also change. It is like a newspaper. Here is his whole speech and photo of him giving the speech. So pretty great experimentation on a mainstream comic book, maybe. Pretty underground. That kind of stuff. Who was this for? And in the end, we have, like I said, a lot of, some nightmare issues. Howard gets to be like imprisoned in a loony bin here. So a lot of crazy stuff happens throughout these issues. Some Kiss appearance also. Maybe they are not really Kiss, but as a drawing they are, so I don't know if that became like a lawsuit. Well, there is a lawsuit, I think, because of Disney, like Donald the Duck, Disney. We have here the appearance of Hellstorm on this issue. That's pretty weird. I didn't expect here Howard gets possessed. Again, we have some experimentation on, for example, here, this kind of page. It is not pretty common, and I think it wasn't at the time, so sometimes the series gives you the idea that it will be stuck for a while and then changes some aspects and surprise you. Like when they do, like, for example, we have this issue that is basically like a meditation on Zen and the art of comic book writing, meditation on comic book writing. So, for me, this was a surprise. And, it's stuff like that in the series. Always surprise you when you don't think about being surprised, but it does. So that's appealing for it now. I think, like, watching what kind of stuff they did, and like realizing that there are some modern stuff that was already done 50 or more years ago. Yes, maybe not in mainstream comic, but and it was by a major company. So yeah, in the end, this has a lot of interviews in the creators, so it gives you a lot of ideas about how it was at the time. This series, what did they wanted to do with it, how was it working on it. Do I recommend it? Not really, and that's why I made this video. It was not a recommendation, because if you don't like this, if you read this, like, you probably still won't like it. But I wanted to show it because maybe you weren't planning on reading this, but after seeing a lot of curious stuff that was done on it, maybe now you're interested and you want to give it a go, like I did. I didn't really. I think this character appeared on some Guardian of the Galaxy. I think the first movie, and that's the first time I saw him, and I watched who is this character, and then I noticed that it was created by Steve Gerber. I knew that Gerber was supposed to be like a good writer, so it catch my attention, but I didn't really expect anything good, and and, and it was good, but I don't recommend it to read it uh, on one sitting, because there are a lot of stories, a lot of text. You maybe will get bored or tired of it, and give it a go, because again, you never know when there will be like an issue that will surprise you greatly. So that's it. Hope to have raised some interest on this character, at least this volume, the original volume, and maybe on the writer, and check out more works by him. I haven't at this point, but maybe one day I will be reading a Man Thing. So that's it. I don't know if this is in print as of now, but I think there are some epic collections, maybe 2 or 3, that collect the same material that this has. So maybe you can look up for them, or for this omnibus. Maybe there will be a reprint at some point. We'll see. Also check out the movie. It doesn't compare to the comic like in the way it's written, but it has some curious scenes.